Hello students, today we will discuss another major issue in international relations, that is called refugees and forced migration. So this is one of the major issue, and this issue was not very much in the earlier agenda of international relations, but during the last 20 years this issue has become an important issue in international relations, and we will discuss why it has become an important issue. So what we will do is we will proceed like this. First we will discuss about the background of the whole issue of refugee and migration, particularly forced migration. Then we will try to understand the conceptual ambiguities that is there with respect to migration, refugees or asylum seekers, and then we will also discuss about the International Refugee Convention of 1951. Then we will discuss the patterns of refugee movements in different periods starting from the First World War, and then we will also focus our attention on the issue why migration will increase in future. So let us start with the background of the issue called refugees and forced migration. The study of refugees and forced migration in international relations is in many ways a latecomer to the discipline. As I said, it is just an issue that dominated in the agenda of international relations in the last 20 years. This is perhaps no great surprise, as the discipline has traditionally focused on questions of stability and war in international relations. So the earlier agenda of international politics was different. The present agenda of international politics is different, and maybe that is one of the reasons why the issue of migration and refugees was not in the agenda of international relations. Refugees lie at the heart of world politics. The causes and consequences of and responses to human displacement are intertwined with many of the core concerns of international relations. If you look at the issue very critically, you will find that it's not an issue that is not related to the core concerns of international relations. Rather, it is very much in the agenda of international relations because of the causes of the refugee problem and also the consequences of this issue for world politics. There are several reasons why we consider the refugee problem or the forced migration problem as an important issue in international relations. First, migration is itself a function of the international system of the states. Without the states, there are no borders to cross, and it is also the crossing of the borders that remains at the heart of the politics of migration. So if you look at the issue of refugee and migration, all related to interstate problem, because people migrate from one state to the other, and so here in a way states are directly involved. Either it is the migration of the people within the state or migration of the people to another country, or the problem of refugees here, and forced migration the other countries are facing. So because of the problem in one country, the other countries are also affected, and that's why it's all related to interstate interaction, and that's why it has become an important issue in international relations. Moreover, international migration by its very definition involves more than one state. Calling attention to interstate relations and to questions of liberal and multilateral cooperation. So it's not that the migrated people cross one state to another, rather the states are also directly affected by this, and to deal better with the situation there is a need for cooperation, there is a need for multilateral cooperation by the countries. So if something happens in Syria, something happens in Iraq or Afghanistan, it's not that these 2-3 countries would be affected. Rather, Pakistan is affected because of Afghanistan problem, Iran is affected because of the Iraq problem, and because of Syria problem also countries like Turkey, other countries they are also affected. So it's not a question of only one country or the other country. Rather, most of the countries living in the neighborhood, they are also affected by these kind of developments. The emergence of key international institutions such as the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, the International Organization for Migration, the International Labour Organization, they also bring us the question of institutional power, sometimes against the state power, and the development of international regimes dealing with migration and refugees. So there are important international institutions that are also dealing with the issue of migration and refugees, and in a way they also influence the state behavior and the working of international politics. So because of all these reasons, migration is not just an issue or a small issue in international politics, rather it has affected the interstate relationship and the relationship of the state actors with non-state actors, transnational actors and international organizations in a substantial way. Although IR has often been accused of Eurocentric or Western-centric scholarship, important alternative voices are also emerging from the countries of the global south on migration studies, and the IR scholarship now focuses on the perspective of both the Western countries and the countries belonging to the global south. So because of all these reasons, lately of course, but migration and refugee study has come to the agenda of international politics. Now let us understand the conceptual issues related to the term migrant, refugee and asylum seekers. A migrant is defined as a person who chooses to move from one particular country or from the country of his origin or her origin to another which will accept them. So basically migration is something related to your comfort, your choice, that you are not happy in a particular country and you want to shift to another country, or you want to migrate to another country. The causes of migration are important because the term migrant is associated with a choice that a person makes to seek a better life elsewhere, and a choice by the state to accept that person. So here it's a question of choice. You have a choice to migrate to another country, and the other country has a choice to accept you or not to accept you. Many people are migrating to Europe, to America, so that is their choice. And again if they decide to settle there, it is again the concerned country that has to accept them or not to accept their application. So it's a question of your choice. By contrast, the term refugee has no association with choice. A refugee is often forced to flee and enter a state without its permission, and it's not always welcomed in the state in which they seek refugee. So the issue is there is no choice for a refugee because they are forced to take asylum, to shift to another country, and they are forced to do that because sometimes when they do that, they don't have the permission of the foreign country, and sometimes they are also not even welcomed, as we daily see from the media, from the newspapers, how people are using boats, how people are going through the sea route, and how they are captured, how they are caught, and how they are returned to their countries of origin. So there are so many events like this, and sometimes we also find that they die because they don't have the basic necessities of life. So it's a kind of horrible situation. So when we talk of the refugees, they don't have the choice because they are forced to seek asylum in another country which may welcome them or which may not welcome them. However, in recent years there is a shift from refugee to forced migrant in both law and policy. Forced migration is defined as migratory movement in which an element of coercion exists, including threat to life and livelihood, whether arising from natural or man-made causes. So the point is, nowadays you find that earlier we talked of only migration, now we are talking of forced migration, and instead of the word refugee, now most of the countries are using the term forced migration or forced migrant. And when we talk about the forced migration or forced migrant, somehow there is an element of coercion, and they are in a way there are problems to their right to life and livelihood, and that is the reason they are shifting or they are going to another country. Sometimes the reason may be man-made or sometimes it is natural. Man-made means genocide, ethnic cleansing, or natural means like environmental reasons, or maybe flood, maybe cyclone, so many other reasons that can be the reason for migration. Asylum seekers, on the other hand, are people who cross international borders seeking protection but whose claim for refugee status is still pending. So it's a different category of the people, particularly those who are living in a foreign country and whose application is still pending. So they are called the asylum seeker. While states have legally binding obligations when they become party to an international regime or regional regime, they are also not obliged to grant refugee status to every individual claiming asylum. So some states may be a party to the regional or international regime related to refugees, but they are not bound to give refugee status to everyone claiming asylum in that particular country. So it is optional for them because there is an element of sovereignty, and being sovereign countries, so they have the right to decide whom they have to give asylum and whom they will not give asylum. State sovereignty allows them to establish national institutions and the criteria for processing asylum claims, but they do have also the obligation not to forcibly return asylum seekers to the countries where they are facing persecution. So the point is, you have the obligation to protect those people. You have the right not to give them asylum, but you will try to your level best not to send those people to the countries of their origin because of the problems associated with that country. They have left their motherland. So this is an obligation that you have to give them protection, and you may not give them asylum, but you will give them protection they need because of their problems associated with the countries of their origin. Now let us discuss about the International Convention on Refugees that was formulated in the 1951. The 1951 Convention relating to the status of refugees has two primary purposes. The first is to provide individuals with the right to enter a sovereign territory without permission. So the first right under the convention is that you can enter into other countries' territory without permission because of your extraordinary circumstances. So that is one right they have under the convention. The second purpose of refugee law is to provide the state with a process for exclusion. So the convention also gives the states the right to give them asylum or not, but they will not send those people to the countries of their origin because, as I said, there may be civil war, there may be ethnic cleansing, there may be genocide. So because of all these reasons, they are not supposed to send those people to the countries of their origin. Rather, they will give them right kind of protection. Unlike a migrant, a refugee is meant to be able to enter into any country without fear of return or penalization. So under the convention, the refugee can enter to any foreign country without fear of return or penalization. So if you enter into another country, so that is perfectly fine if that country is a member of the international convention, and it is the obligation of that country not to penalize or not to return you to the country of your origin. In the 1951 convention, Article 31 stipulates that a person once deemed to be a refugee is neither to be penalized nor detained for entering into the host country without its permission, and must be provided with legal protection by the host state. So you will be given necessary protection, your right to life, your liberty, your freedom, although they may be restricted under certain circumstances, but you will be given the right to have your own life. So in that circumstances, the member countries would not return that particular person. This means that a person cannot be an illegal immigrant if found to be a refugee. So there is a difference between illegal immigrant and a refugee. And if that country is a signatory to the convention of 1951, then the state is required to determine the person's status first, so that refugees are not wrongly punished. So the convention makes a clear distinction between illegal immigrants and refugees, and when you are a party to the convention, you have to make two different laws. One is to deal with the illegal immigrants and other with the refugees, and the refugees under all circumstances they will be given protection by that particular country. You may deal with them differently, but for illegal immigrants you may deal with differently. But when somebody becomes a refugee, you have to respect certain rights given under the convention, and that is the problem why most of the countries particularly the European and the American countries, they don't allow other people to enter into their territory, because once you enter, you are being deported in the name of illegal immigrant, because once you become a refugee, you will be given certain rights under the International Convention on Refugees of 1951. The pattern of refugee movements have varied from time to time, particularly in the second half of the 20th century, and on that basis we can say that there can be 4 phases of refugee movement in the history of international politics. So after the First World War, there was a lot of devastation in the First World War. There was also the interwar period, there was also the Second World War, and during all these important phases, and there was also genocide in Armenia and the fall of the Ottoman and the Habsburg Empire. So because of these regions, there was lot of refugees, but at that time the countries accepted the refugees for the selfish reason, you can say so, that they needed medical doctors, scientists and professional personal and professional people, and that's why they were given the refugee status or asylum. During the second phase, that starts from 1945 to 1982, tension between liberal capitalist states and the communist bloc increased. Accepting refugees from the east became the usual propaganda tool for the western states, demonstrating the superiority of political systems based on individual human rights. So the western countries particularly welcomed the refugees from the communist countries in a way that was intended to glorify their political system, their constitution, that we respect the rights of individuals, we are based on individual freedom. So that in a way was based on the superiority perception of the political system of the liberal democratic countries. The third phase that can be from 1982 to 2000 was marked by the proliferation of countries producing refugees in the global south due to military coup and intervention sponsored by the western democracies belonging to the global north. So the problem is because of all these reasons there was lots of problem of refugees during that period. The fourth and the most recent period in the evolution of the legal category of refugees corresponds what we can call since the 9/11, which is better known as American invasion of Afghanistan. So during that period until today you find all kind of refugees, maybe in Syria, maybe in Africa, maybe in Asia. So there are many countries that are ravaged by civil war, ethnic cleansing, genocide, and because of that there are lots of refugees, and that's also a lot of problem in the countries selectively accepting some people or totally refusing their permission and deporting them to their mother country. So in the current phase you can start that with Afghanistan, with the problem in Syria, problem with the Ukraine, problem in Palestine. So these are all current problems that has affected the refugee movement in international relations, and you find there is a lot of selectivity that when there are refugees coming from countries like Ukraine, so the other European countries they accept them, and if there are refugees from Syria, so they don't accept them. So there is a lot of selectivity and politics over the issue of refugees. This period is marked by the threat of terrorism and criminal violence, as well as the intensification of climate change. The internal migration has increased, the external migration has increased, and that has become one of the reasons why it has become an important agenda of contemporary international politics. Now let us discuss why there is a fear that migration will increase in future. The problem of refugees can be expected to increase in the 21st century, and there are 2 important reasons why there is a pessimism on this issue. First, the conditions that generate refugees are unlikely to disappear in the foreseeable future. The problem of ethnicity, the problem of genocide, the problem of ethnic cleansing, the problem of civil war. So it is not going to be out of the agenda of international politics anytime soon. Rather, these problems will continue. So these issues will continue even in future. Patterns of demographic change are also very uneven. rapid population growth is confined to developing states who are also confronting huge economic and political challenges. So if you look at the problem of demography, countries like Germany, countries like Japan, so they, countries like China even, they are facing a lot of, demographic decline problem, and in some countries of global south you find population explosion, and this may be the reason why there will be lots of refugee problem in future. The post Cold War era has also been characterized by the spread of civil wars in which civilians have been the explicit target of ethnic cleansing and sometimes as a deliberate policy of their own government. So the problem of civil war, the problem of ethnic cleansing, the problem of population explosion, so these issues combined together will definitely create lots of refugees in future. In such circumstances, many states face the problem of sudden and massive influxes of refugees. So so you have lots of population, but the domestic system is not viable, and that may be one of the reasons why there will be more refugees in future. Second, despite the humanitarian sympathy for refugees in most Western states, this is tempered by the ongoing concerns over unemployment and economic insecurity. Consequently, Western states are unlikely to subordinate their perceived national interest to humanitarian impulses. So you find there are lots of political parties in the West, those who target the refugees, the forced migrants, and they don't welcome these people because they think that they can pose a security problem to them. They can create a kind of cultural problem to them. There is also a religious issue. So because of all these reasons, they are not welcomed, rather they are targeted in those countries. So again, that is again a problem, and also they have they consider that they have limited resources. There are already economic recession in those countries, and they have also the problem of unemployment. So because of all these reasons, so they may not accept refugees from countries belonging to global south. As more states restrict their refugees intake, it becomes harder for particular states not to follow the trend. If one state laws are more generous than the neighboring countries, then asylum seekers will definitely favor that country in that particular region. So there is again a problem that whether your domestic laws are welcoming the refugees or it's targeting the refugees, and most of the developed countries they always make a distinction, and that is from our perspective again. They have their own logic. We can't force our logic over them. So so they are they have become now very possessive about their culture, their country, and there is no harm in that. Becoming possessive is all right, but we should not forget that we are also human beings, and we are also concerned with the people, and what is happening in their country we should be concerned about. So that is the whole debate. Let us summarize what we have discussed so far. We discussed that refugee and migration issue has been a latecomer to the international relations discipline, primarily because traditional international relations theories primarily focused on states and their interactions rather on non-state actors or human mobility. We discussed that the refugee and migration issue has been a latecomer to the higher discipline primarily because traditional international relations theories focused predominantly on states and their interactions rather than on non-state actors or human mobility. Additionally, until recently, issues related to refugees and migrants were often seen as humanitarian concerns rather than strategic or security issues that directly impacted state interests, thus receiving less attention in the field of international relations until their broader implications became more apparent in global politics and economics. Then we discussed about the conceptual clarification between migrants, refugees, forced migrants, and asylum seekers that refers to distinct categories of people based on their reasons for movement and legal status under international law and convention. While migrants move voluntarily for various reasons, refugees are forced to flee their countries due to persecution. Forced migrants include both refugees and internally displaced persons, and asylum seekers are individuals seeking international protection through the refugee status determination process. Each category carries different legal implications and protection mechanisms under international and national laws. The main objective of the 1951 Convention relating to the status of refugees are to ensure that refugees receive international protection and to establish a framework for their legal status, rights, and obligations in host countries, including access to basic rights such as education, work, and social services. We then discussed about global refugee movements that can generally be categorized into four broad phases. In the first phase, that we can say as pre-World War second phase, includes movements primarily driven by political persecution, ethnic conflict, and economic hardships. Examples include Jewish refugees fleeing Europe during the rise of Nazi Germany and Armenians fleeing the Ottoman persecution. The second phase is the post Second World War and the Cold War period. The establishment of the 1951 Refugee Convention and subsequent Cold War conflicts led to significant refugee movements in the world. Examples include refugees from Eastern Europe, the Korean War, and conflicts in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Afghanistan. The third phase is the post Cold War period phase. Following the end of the Cold War, conflicts in the Balkans, Africa, and the Middle East caused large-scale refugee movements. This period also saw increasing movements due to environmental factors such as hurricanes, droughts, and economic disparities. The last phase is called the contemporary era phase. The contemporary era is characterized by the ongoing conflicts in the Middle East, such as Syria, Africa, particularly in South Sudan, Democratic Republic of Congo, and other regions, leading to continued refugee flows. Additionally, factors such as climate change, urbanization, and economic disparities contribute to the complexity of refugee movements in different parts of the world. Then we discussed that the problem of refugees is expected to increase in the 21st century due to several interconnected factors. The first is conflict and instability. Ongoing and new conflicts around the world continue to displace millions of people. Civil wars, ethnic and religious conflicts, and political instability force many people to flee their own countries in search of better opportunities and physical safety. Next factor is climate change. Environmental factors such as rising sea levels, droughts, floods, and natural disasters are expected to increase due to climate change regions. These environmental challenges can lead to displacement and migration as people seek habitable and safe areas to live. Next reason is population growth and urbanization. Rapid population growth combined with urbanization and insufficient infrastructure in developing countries can exacerbate social and economic pressures, leading to internal displacement and cross-border movements. Another reason is economic disparities. Economic inequalities within and between countries can drive migration and displacement as people seek better opportunities and livelihood elsewhere. Economic crisis, job losses, and lack of sustainable development can contribute to growing problem of migration and refugees. Last reason is governance challenges. Weak governance, corruption, and inadequate protection of human rights in some countries can contribute to growing conflict and displacement. Lack of effective governance can also hinder humanitarian responses and exacerbate refugee crises in different parts of the world. These factors collectively suggest that the issue of refugees will continue to be a significant global challenge in the 21st century, necessitating international cooperation, humanitarian assistance, and sustainable development efforts to address the root causes and provide protection and assistance to the displaced populations. In the next lecture, we will discuss about the role of the United Nations High Commissioner of Refugees, the debate who bears the cost of these refugees, and the measures how to resolve the global refugee imbalance in the world. Thank you for your attention. We will meet in the next class.